Welcome to another chilling tale. If you're a fan of scary stories and aren't afraid to face the unknown, leave a like now, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss any of our videos. And of course, share your thoughts in the comments. I was never close to my neighbors. The couple in the house next door was always quiet, even too reserved, but it never bothered me. I always thought they were just people who valued their privacy. But about a month ago, I started noticing things that simply didn't make sense. It all started with the noises. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I would wake up hearing the sound of furniture being dragged around in their house. It sounded like they were rearranging everything, but always at night, as if they didn't want anyone to see. The next morning, everything seemed normal. I found it strange, but let it go. Then came the laughter. They would laugh quietly, muffled, but there was something unsettling about it. It wasn't a joyful laugh, but a distorted sound, almost as if they were mimicking a human laugh. Always in the middle of the night, always at the same time, 3:13 a.m. I even wrote this down because it started happening every day, like clockwork. Then came the smell. It was a strong odor, somewhere between burnt and decayed, that started coming from their house. Sometimes it seemed to be coming from the chimney, other times from the backyard. At first, I thought maybe they were burning trash, but the smell was unbearable and far from normal. I complained once, but they just looked at me with those strange smiles and didn't say anything. Last night, however, things got much worse. I was in my room, reading, when I heard a sound like digging. Curious, I went to the window that overlooked their backyard. The couple was out there, illuminated only by a lantern. They were digging a huge hole in the middle of the lawn. The shovel hit the ground hard, in a hypnotic rhythm. I watched for a few minutes, unable to understand what they were doing. The hole looked deep enough to bury something big. They didn't speak, just dug with a chilling precision. On impulse, I opened the window and asked, "What are you doing out there?" They immediately stopped and looked at me. Even in the dim light, I could see they were sweating and covered in dirt. Then, as if they had rehearsed it, they both smiled that disturbing smile and replied in unison, "It's for you." My mouth went dry, and a shiver ran down my spine. They went back to digging, ignoring my presence. I closed the window and stood still for a while, trying to process what had just happened. What did they mean by that? I spent the rest of the night trying not to lose my mind. I locked all the doors and windows and sat on the couch, holding a kitchen knife with the lights off. At 3:13 a.m., the laughter started again, but this time it was closer. It seemed to come from the front of my house. I gathered the courage to peek through the curtain. They were there, standing on my sidewalk, staring directly at my window. Even in the dark, I could see the smiles frozen on their faces. They didn't move, didn't say anything. They just stood there for a few minutes before turning around and heading back to their house. This morning, I went outside to investigate. The hole in their backyard was covered, as if it had never existed. But the smell was stronger than ever. I'm writing this now because I don't know what to do. I called the police, but they said there's nothing they can do without concrete evidence. And to be honest, I don't have the courage to tell them about the "it's for you" part. Sounds crazy, but something is wrong. They know where I live. They know I know. And I'm afraid that the next time the noises start, it won't be in their house. It'll be in mine. When I moved into this building about 2 months ago, everything seemed perfect. A quiet place, affordable rent, neighbors friendly enough to greet me in the hallway, but not invasive of my privacy. The apartment next to mine seemed to be occupied by a young couple, nice but reserved. They always smiled and waved, but never talked for long. I didn't think much of it. Everyone lives their life in their own way. The first few weeks were normal, until I started noticing strange sounds coming from their apartment. Sometimes, late at night, I would hear scratching on the walls. At first, I thought it was rats or some plumbing issue, but it was more than that. The scratching was rhythmic, methodical, as if someone was scratching on purpose. Then came the whispers, low, almost inaudible, but clear enough to make me uncomfortable. Whenever I tried to listen closely, they would stop. It was as if they knew I was listening. I tried to convince myself that it was muffled conversation or even their TV, until one night I heard something different. It was music, a children's melody, the kind you hear in old music boxes. But something was wrong with it. It sounded like it was being played backwards, creating a distorted, unsettling sound. It was coming from the apartment next door, but when I pressed my ear to the wall, the sound seemed to be inside it. I decided to confront them the next day, but to my surprise, I didn't see them anymore. I asked the doorman if they had gone away. That's when he told me that the apartment next door had been empty for months. The couple had disappeared without a trace. The police were called, but they never found any clues about what happened. They just left, as if they had never existed. I was in shock. I tried to argue that it was impossible, that I saw them almost every day. The doorman just looked at me with a strange expression and said, "You must be confused. No one has lived there for a long time." That night was the worst. I woke up to loud banging on my wall. It wasn't scratching this time, it was pounding. Hard, rhythmic, as if someone was punching the wall with force. I grabbed my phone and started recording. As the sound continued, I felt a chill run down my spine. It wasn't just the noise. It was as if the wall was vibrating, pulsing in a wrong way. Finally, I shouted, "Who's there?" And the sound stopped. For a moment, there was total silence. Then, I heard a whisper, low, coming from the wall. "It's empty, but it's not unoccupied." I dropped my phone in shock. I ran to turn on all the lights and stayed awake until dawn. When I listened to the recording I made, my heart almost stopped. The banging was there, loud and clear, but what paralyzed me was the sound in the background. Between the bangs, there was something, a low, distorted laugh, mixed with that children's melody played backwards. This morning, I called a friend to help me investigate. We tried to enter the apartment next door, but the door was locked, and the doorman confirmed no one had the key. Still, I asked him to check the security cameras. He hesitated but eventually agreed. We watched the footage together from the past few weeks. Every night, at 3 a.m., a shadow would pass by the door of the apartment next door. There was no one there. No one went out, no one came in. Just a shadow, tall, shapeless, going back and forth in the hallway. I recently moved into this apartment, looking for a quiet place to start fresh. The building seemed ideal, safe, well located, with seemingly normal neighbors. But it was during my first week that I met him. It was an ordinary morning when I heard knocks on the door. When I opened it, there was the new neighbor, holding a plate of cake wrapped in plastic. He had an unnervingly wide smile, as if it were frozen on his face. His eyes didn't blink, fixed on mine in a way that made me feel uncomfortable. "Welcome to the building. We made this for you." He handed me the plate, insisting on maintaining eye contact. I thanked him but politely declined. I don't accept anything from strangers. He stood there for a few seconds, still smiling, before finally turning and leaving without saying another word. Since then, I noticed he was always around. Every time I looked out the window, there he was, in the apartment across from mine, staring directly into my window. Sometimes he would stand there for hours, motionless like a statue. Even when I closed the curtains, I felt like he was still there, watching. Things escalated last night. I was on the couch, watching TV, when I heard a faint sound. Tap, tap, tap. Soft knocks on the living room window. My heart raced. Who could be there on the 10th floor? I thought maybe it was a branch or a bird, but the sound kept going, persistent. I got up cautiously and went to the window. When I opened the curtain, I almost screamed. He was there outside. My neighbor, in the dark. No rope, nothing to hold him up, just standing there, hands on the glass, with that frozen smile on his face. His eyes seemed even more fixed and empty, as if there was no life in them. I backed away, trying to understand what was happening. He shouldn't be there, it was impossible. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but when I came back, he was gone. I looked outside, but all I saw was the emptiness of the night. I spent the rest of the night awake, with all the lights on and every door and window locked. I tried to convince myself it was some kind of hallucination caused by exhaustion. But now, as I write this, I'm hearing the knocks again. This time, they're not on the window. They're coming from the door to my living room. I don't know what to do. I won't open. I can't open. But he's out there. I know he is. I can feel it. And the most terrifying part is that, under the door, I see something dripping. It looks like cake frosting. I always found my neighbors' behavior strange. They lived in the apartment next door, and during the day, the place never seemed to come alive. No movement, no windows open, not even a sound coming from inside. It was as if they had disappeared, but every night, things would change. That's when the lights would turn on, one by one, as if some hidden routine had begun. Rivers of laughter, voices, and conversations, but I could never quite make out what they were saying. It seemed like they were having visitors, but the strange part was that it always felt more than just a social gathering. There was something wrong in the way they spoke, something that made me feel uncomfortable. I wondered why I never saw them leave the house, not for work, not to buy anything. Over time, it became an obsession for me. What were they doing locked away in there, always so hidden? Why did their lives seem to be limited to those strange noises at night? Then, one night, curiosity got the better of me. I was sitting on my couch, listening to the laughter and conversations coming from the apartment next door. When the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway, a cold sensation crawled up my spine. I looked at their door, which was slightly ajar. Couldn't resist. I carefully approached, placing my eye in the crack. The hallway was empty, no sign of movement. But the voices continued, and the footsteps were closer, as if they were coming directly toward me. Closer and closer. I couldn't understand where they were coming from since all I could see was the empty hallway. I prepared to pull away, but before I could take a step, something happened. From the other side of the door, something whispered, soft but clear. "Do you want to come in?" My blood ran cold. The air thickened, and I couldn't move. I didn't know what was worse. The fact that I had heard that whisper or the fact that it seemed to come from inside the door, as if it had been whispered directly in my ear, even though I was on the outside. I stood frozen for a few seconds. Then, a low, almost muffled laugh came from the other side of the door, followed by an unmistakable sound. The creaking of something moving slowly. My body reacted, and I jumped away from the door, running back to my apartment without looking back. The neighbors in the house next door have always been friendly. The kind of people who greet you with a smile and a wave whenever you cross paths. During the first year I lived here, everything seemed normal. Occasional conversations, jokes at the gate, nothing out of the ordinary. But gradually, I started noticing something strange. Little actions that bothered me, that made me feel uncomfortable. Sometimes, when I walked past their window, I could see them through the crack in the curtain, always still, staring into the void. But the worst started happening at night. When the house next door seemed to be silent, I'd hear footsteps, as if someone was walking down their hallway. The sound was slow, heavy, as if the footsteps weren't touching the ground but dragging. It wasn't natural. And the strangest thing, whenever I went to check, whenever I looked through the window or approached the fence to listen better, everything was silent. Their house was empty, completely dark, and still. First, I tried to ignore it. I thought it might be some animal, maybe rats or something like that, but the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. Every night, the sound of the footsteps grew louder, clearer, and at times, I could swear I heard a faint voice, murmurs that seemed to come from inside the walls. I couldn't understand what was happening. One night, curiosity finally got the better of me. I was desperate to understand what was happening in that house next door. I called their number, hoping that the wife or husband would answer. I wanted to ask about the strange noises, about what was going on in that house. The phone rang a few times before someone picked up. The voice on the other end was cold, distant, as if they weren't really speaking to me, but from somewhere far away in some dark place. "Hello?" The voice said. "Hi, this is the neighbor next door. I've been hearing some strange noises coming from your house at night. Footsteps, murmurs. I thought there might be some problem, I said, trying to sound casual. The voice was silent for a moment, as if assessing my question. Then, it replied in a tone that made a chill run down my spine. Did you really hear them? Or is the house starting to talk to you too? The phrase made me freeze. The silence that followed was so thick I could almost hear it. Whatever was happening there, I wasn't ready to hear it. I didn't know if the person was just joking, or if there was some truth behind it. I couldn't speak anymore. I quickly hung up the phone, my hands shaking. That night, the footsteps in the hallway continued. But this time, I didn't look through the window anymore. I didn't want to see what was there, or hear what the house was saying. I woke up the next day with the feeling that something was wrong. I went over to my neighbor's house, but when I got there, the door was open. There was no one inside, but the house was strangely full of a feeling of discomfort, of something that was there but shouldn't have been. The hallway was empty, but the walls seemed to vibrate with something unsaid. I don't know what happened to them. I never saw them again. And since that night, the house next door continues to whisper, with the dragging footsteps echoing through the night. Closer and closer.